Welcome to the Wednesday, June 26, 2019 edition of the Clemson Dubcast. Hope everybody's having a great week out there, great summer. Summer seems to be flying by. July 4th right around the corner. The train keeps rolling. TigerIllustrated.com. Paul Strelo, talked to him the other day. He was on his way to Atlanta for the Rivals 5-Star Challenge. Right now, he has some really good Wednesday nuggets to lead off the day from his chats with Clemson commitments. Also, we're doing a fun new summer series counting down the top 25 Clemson football players for 2019. Amari Rogers was Monday. Gage Cervinka yesterday, Tuesday. Got another one coming up today. Love hearing from those of you out there who learned about TigerIllustrated.com through the podcast and subscribed. Great time to be a member as we count down the days to what should be another spectacular football season. Title sponsor of the Clemson Dubcast, Parham Smith Archenhold Law Firm in downtown Greenville. They have been with us from the very beginning. Blake Smith has been a good friend of mine for years, dating back to the days when he taught a law class at Clemson with Terry Don Phillips. Also, Brooke Archenhold, major Clemson fans. The forte of their firm, which is at 15 Washington Park in Greenville, is medical negligence. They represent patients and their families in medical negligence actions. Also handle all sorts of other personal injury litigation. Free consultations. Parham Smith and Archenhold. Give them a call, 864-990-4581, or go to parhamlaw.com. Quick word about Uptown Realty LLC, headed up by Patrick Enzer, former sports writer who decided to get into the real estate game. Uptown Realty, locally owned and operated out of Sumter, but they serve the Eastern Midlands and PD area with the buying and selling of homes, commercial properties, and land. They also offer affordable new housing in the mid-130,000s from a local custom builder. Patrick is the sole owner and broker in charge. Grew up in Anderson, going to Clemson games, been in Sumter for 15 years. Loyal Tiger Illustrated subscriber, loyal Dubcast listener. Website is uptownrealtysc.com. All right, let's get to our interview with Kevin McCrarey, longtime radio personality in the state of South Carolina. Last week, we interviewed Mark Dofer, talked about the changing nature of the TV broadcasting industry, and now we're going to do a little bit of the same with Kevin about why he left the radio business, some of the changing dynamics of that. Just really interested in learning more about the market forces that are really changing various facets of the media industry. All right, here we go. Enjoy. Joined by KMAC, Kevin McCrarey, longtime friend and colleague, I guess former colleague, now that you're out of the toy department, so to speak.
Yeah.
How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well. Good to hear from you, Larry. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. All right. First of all, we were talking off the air. I had Mark Dofer on last week, and it just, I think I'm interested, and a lot of people out there are interested in the, I guess, states of the various sports media industries. You know, mine's a lot different from y'all's, radio and then TV and then of course newspapers. There are a lot of different nuances, or I guess, that are exclusive to each of those mediums. So, would like to explore that. First of all, how long have you been out of the radio industry?
It's funny that you say that. This week will mark 2 years since my last show on Sports Talk, almost to the day. So 2 years, exactly 2 years since I was in the rat race, so to speak. And it's hard to believe when I sit here and look back on it. But yeah, it was about this time that I announced. I knew, of course, before that that I was going to be leaving, but I waited till the end because I didn't want to have a long Derek Jeter goodbye. I just wanted to get in and out. But it's been 2 years.
So what happened? Like, what were the circumstances that sort of led to you making that decision?
Yeah, there were a lot of different factors that were playing into that. I did it for 15 years. Like right out of college, I jumped into it when I was in college. I was interning. So for the better part of my entire adult life, I had been in the media, covering, that same beat, the state of South Carolina beat, on Sports Talk, and came on as Kornblut's co-host when Teddy Hefner moved on. And I just really, for a few years, it kind of felt like I might want to challenge myself and get out of my comfort zone. I have now a 7-year-old. My wife has 3 older daughters, the oldest of which has had a lot of medical challenges. I just felt like maybe it was the time for me to do something. If I was going to do it, it was time. I didn't see myself being Phil Kornblut, doing it for 30 years plus. I never really envisioned that. And I had accomplished a lot of things and experienced a lot of things that I had dreamed about. So it was just, the simple answer to that is it was just time. And I was very confident in my decision. In fact, that my company did, they made an effort when I put in my notice to stay, and made a very good offer, but I was ready to move on at that point.
Sam, what are you doing now?
So now I'm working at Colonial Life Voluntary Benefits Insurance Company here based in Columbia, and not the arena. So I still get asked, "Oh, can you get tickets?" Like I couldn't escape that part of my job. I don't work at the arena. The company's the title sponsor of the arena, so I'm a client manager for their large accounts in the Northeast. So I get to deal with just some of our producers in that part of the world. So, that's my new hat. I joke with people. I left my job in sports to go to my dream job in insurance, the natural progression.
So you when you say the Northeast, you mean the Northeast United States?
Right. Yeah, that's my territory.
And so are you traveling up there, or are you just? I
do. Yeah, I travel up there, to Philadelphia, the upper New England area, and a lot of the Pennsylvania corridor there, all the way over to Pittsburgh. So, I enjoy it. Really, I have to say, it was just so out of my comfort zone that I really felt like, I didn't know if I could even do it, but I was appreciative of Colonial Life for giving me that opportunity, and I loved every moment of it. It's a big adjustment, going from a job in the media to working really a 9-to-5er. Not that it's 100% a 9-to-5er, but compared to what I did before, where I never felt like I could unplug, it was a relief that I didn't even realize until I kind of got into it.
So what made the job sort of attractive to you, and what attracted them? Like what made you attractive to them? Like I'm just curious, like when you go from doing something totally different.
Yeah. Now I think the big transferable skills for me, I mean, this is a job too, where, there's you're juggling a lot of things at once. You have to, have attention to detail, be able to manage a lot of different type of personalities when you're talking about, large producers. These are, some of the best of the best and big clients. So you're going to have a lot of different personalities that you have to manage. And, really those soft skills that transfer from a job, doing a statewide radio show for 15 years, you realize that you do kind of build up some ability to communicate, and you cover Steve Spurrier and Dabo Sweeney and Frank Martin. You know how to interact with different personalities that don't always want to interact with you and don't always like what you have to say necessarily. So all of those things I think helped a lot, and knowing that I'd been in the fire, so it wasn't going to scare me. But I think there's no question they took a chance on me. And it was funny. Some of the people in the building knew who I was. So I don't know. I was like, I don't know if that's going to help me or hurt me. But it's interesting. My wife actually works at the same company. So that was she's the one that kind of turned me on to the role and said, "Hey, there might be something you could think about." And so I applied, and the rest is history. So now my wife and I actually work together, and that's pretty cool too. It's like from a husband that was gone a lot of nights and weekends to one that gets to, drop the kid off at school and ride to work together. And it was a great move in that regard.
You talked about wanting to challenge yourself and do new things. What does, as a radio host, what does, I guess, for lack of, I don't know if this is the right word, what does stagnation, like professional stagnation, feel like and look like, if you could describe it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I really think you hear this with coaches and players that'll say, if it's not fun anymore, I'll get out of it or I'll retire. And you also hear, trying to walk away on your own terms. And that was important to me. And I did, the show that I was a part of, this year, that I put my blood, sweat, and tears, they shuttered the whole network. It went belly up. And did I know that was coming? Absolutely not. Did I know it could happen at any moment given the volatility of the business? Yes. And that just crushed me on a lot of different levels when that happened, because there are people that I know and care about deeply that were a part of that, and my blood, sweat, and tears were a part of that network. And it was soul crushing to go to the website and see that it was gone, and every interview that I had done and every story that I posted just erased, like it didn't exist. So that was tough. But when I was at games, and I just, I love the people, still miss a lot of the people, still have the opportunity to talk to them and catch up with them. That was my favorite part of the beat, but it got to the point where it just seemed like work, where there's other places that I wanted to be, where I wanted to be at, my daughter's soccer game, or I just wanted to be home for dinner, not on the air at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and getting home at close to 9 when the kids are in bed. So that's when I realized that, hey, I've got to do something where I can put my full heart into it. I didn't feel like my heart was in it as much as it probably needed to be.
So I'm curious, like with newspapers, something I'm familiar with, like the market forces that have led to the decline of newspapers are pretty clear. This thing called the internet, advertising dollars in the hard copy newspapers not translating to the internet. Kind of a vicious cycle of layoffs, producing a lesser product, which then makes you less marketable, makes people less interested in buying your product. What are the market forces that made, sports talk and what you're referring to, Phil Kornblut, the longtime institution in the state of South Carolina, cease to exist?
Well, it's an ever-changing world now for everybody, and the media. I don't have to say, first of all, it's not valued by the general public the way it once was, which is, to me, that's very sad. And at the end of the day, I will always. I'm a journalism guy. If I went to school, that was my dream, and it still saddens me just to see kind of the state of journalism and the way it's regarded or disregarded by the public, and the lack of value that people see in it. But I do think that if you're not evolving and staying ahead of the curve and coming up with ways to really expand your brand and be innovative and creative, you're not going to make it. And even then you might not make it, because you could have a really good show. You could have a great show. And if you're talking about a corporate endeavor like sports talk, if they're not making money on it, it doesn't matter how many people are listening. It's all about those advertisement dollars. And, that's just the bottom line, and people aren't spending those dollars the way they used to. And it's very hard to make a good living doing it. You have to really hustle and have your show, and then a lot of people are out selling their own advertisement. They're out writing articles and doing everything they can, which just sucks up more of your time and resources. And it's not for everybody, and people burn out on that quickly, and they want to go find something else. And I still remember when I actually did leave, there were so many of my colleagues that called, and it was like, you would have thought that I had escaped from Alcatraz. It was like, how did you do it? Like, how did you, because you kind of get into it and you do it for so long, you don't see yourself doing anything else. Like, what else could I possibly do if I don't do this? But, it really is tough. And I think a lot of good people that need to be in it probably are getting out of it. Not talking about myself, but, it's just too bad to see, to see that it's not valued by more people, the work that people do.
So Learfield Communications is that's who owned the South Carolina Radio Network. Is that right?
That's right. Learfield did.
Okay, and so had they just purchased them, or they were a long-time owner?
Yeah, so they had purchased them a while back. They had acquired them, but Learfield does, and most people recognize that name as really a rights holder for play-by-play. They have Alabama for a long spell. They had Clemson. They have or at least had a stake at South Carolina, have about a 49% stake. They have the broadcast rights to schools across the country. They own the KFC Yum Arena. They do the whole 9 yards. So really they have these networks in Missouri, and they had one in South Carolina, in Iowa, in Nebraska, that did news and sports, and just that was throughout the day, news and sports cast. And Sports Talk was really the only long form show that they had. And when they acquired the network, we were very nervous, but they did stick with us and believed in what we were doing. But I know they just recently merged with ISP, I believe. And when that went down, I think they realized that it just wasn't really worth it for them to continue to do it. I don't think they were losing money, but it just was an endeavor that was so small compared to the bigger fish they're frying with Alabama and Louisville and Oregon State and these other big programs where they're out doing multi-million-dollar deals. It just wasn't worth their time and resources to continue to produce and distribute things in South Carolina. So they just stuck with Missouri and Iowa for their networks and focused their resources on other places, which, it's a business decision for them. But it was certainly tough to see that happen.
When did Learfield purchase Sports Talk or the radio network?
It was around 2008 when they first purchased it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, what was the arrangement?
Before that, it was owned by TeleSouth, a group out of Jackson, Mississippi. So Learfield bought the network from TeleSouth with the intention of expanding into South Carolina and doing what they did in Missouri and Iowa, in Nebraska and South Carolina.
So it's always been sort of corporately run, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And that's the thing with the network. It's a little different than a lot of just stations per se, although now a lot of stations are owned by iHeartMedia, which was formerly Clear Channel, and then there's Cumulus, and there's all those big conglomerates. The mom and pop radio is really gone now, and that's been a big change. But with the network, it was kind of like NBC. You had an affiliate in Columbia, you had an affiliate in Greenville and Spartanburg and Charleston and Newberry. So there were about 30 affiliates around the state that picked up news and sports and sports talk. So it was really neat to have that statewide audience and really be able to, have a voice in what was happening in the state. And that's what made that show so cool.
It's interesting talking about newspapers in the state of South Carolina. The State, the Greenville News, I guess Myrtle Beach, Sun News, the Spartanburg Herald Journal. I might be missing some, but all those are corporately run by larger, conglomerates or whatever, all those newspapers have just plummeted over the years in terms of quality. Meanwhile, the Post and Courier has become clearly the best paper in the state. I mean, they've probably declined too, but still relative to the state of the industry in 2019, there's still a high quality newspaper, and they're family owned. And so I've always believed that that's the major sort of thrust of that, is you have that local sort of investment and pride in the product that, that the other newspapers, you're basically just a line item, to somebody, to, stockholders in New York, and it's like, okay, we have to cut, if we're not making what the stockholders want, we have to cut, 15% of our workforce. And that's that, there's a big difference, I guess, between the two.
Absolutely. And I think that, and it's just the way our world is now, not just with journalism, but maybe across the board. And it is unfortunate, again, because it's so important. And you do make a great point. And you look at, even on a national level, the Washington Post, now it's got a very well-known owner now, but, that's a unionized paper, and they've made it. I mean, there's a model where it'll work, and people still want good news and straightforward news and reporting, and it's all been muddied up now with just the whole national conversations. Just as we all know, it's just nonstop, and people are just over it. But I think at the end of the day, there is still a place for just good journalism that people know is going to tell a straightforward story, and you see less and less of that now for a lot of different reasons. A, access, and B, time. Reporters don't have time to do those in-depth stories, so they're just churning and burning now, and the more mistakes happen, you get less quality, and it just kind of feeds into the cycle. But there's no question, I don't know what the state of the media is going to look like 20 years from now, because it looks a lot different now than it did even 5 years ago.
You mentioned advertising dollars just weren't adding up for the radio network. How much of that is it basically, in layman's terms, in the cities where they have affiliates, they just, not as many people were interested in advertising? And how much of that, like Charleston and Greenville, and I guess Columbia to a lesser extent, are kind of thriving, bigger cities. But there's the opposite of that in most of these small towns in South Carolina. They're just sucking wind, and there's everything's the downtowns have shuttered businesses and all that. A lot of the manufacturing has moved elsewhere, has long since moved elsewhere. Is that, in your eyes, a big factor in this? A lot of those small towns just don't have the businesses that are equipped to advertise on a radio show?
Well, I think that's what hurts some of those local stations that are trying to make it, because there were some mom and pop stations and some owners that had owned their station for decades and decades, and it was a family business. I think at WKDK in Newberry, and Jimmy Coggins has been there. He's an institution in that area, and it's just a labor of love for him. Now, from a network standpoint, they were trying to go after sponsors that wanted to do a one buy, and then you can cover the whole state. And even if they didn't want to cover Newberry and Bishopville, we could set it up with technology where it would blast into our Greenville and Myrtle Beach and Columbia and Spartanburg markets, or Hilton Head, if that's what they preferred. So they were trying to sell the entire network, not just one of the affiliates here and there. But those are bigger deals, and they're not always easy to a lot of it. It was state government and different people that are going to be able to spend those big dollars. But in South Carolina, there's not as many companies that are going to invest on that level in local radio. And those companies usually have an advertising and marketing department that's located in New York somewhere that is going to make that decision. So it was a challenge, I know. We had some good salespeople, but a lot of it was just, some of it is just an emotional buy. I really like that show. I want to hear my name on it. I want to hear my business's name on it. But some of it was, there wasn't enough of just those bigger companies that wanted to get behind it and support it the way they were hoping it would happen.
How much has satellite radio maybe taken a bite into that sort of format's market share, so to speak?
Yeah, I think satellite radio has had an impact, but I think terrestrial radio will always have a place because people like local coverage. You can tune in to satellite radio and hear national guys do their thing, and they're talented, but they might spend some time on Clemson, their national program, but they're not going to spend any time on the local high school team in your town, or they're not going to spend any time on things in your community that you care about. So that's where there's always a spot for local radio, and people appreciate that, and they want to kind of feel like they know the people that they're listening to on their drive to work or their drive home from work or on their lunch break, and they're talking about the topics of the day in that area. They're talking about Will Muschamp or recruiting or Dabo Sweeney, or that's what they want to hear about, as well as not just the national talk. So I do think there's always going to be a place for terrestrial radio. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when satellite radio came out, they said this is going to be the end of radio. The same way they said radio was going to be dead when TV came out. There is a place for it. People are always going to be in their cars. They're always going to want to hear things, but there's no question, not just satellite radio, but podcast and Spotify. There are a lot of different alternatives where you can hone in and hear exactly what you want to hear. I want to hear about Clemson. I can listen to a Clemson podcast. I have plenty to choose from, or the Gamecocks. So I think that's a factor too.
Over the 10 or so months we've been doing the Dubcast, we've developed a great relationship with the folks over at the Abernathy Boutique Hotel. In addition to being a great meeting spot for our interviews we conduct with local personalities, it's also a fantastic place to stay. The Abernathy is rolling out a loyalty savings program for 2019. After your third stay, you'll automatically be rewarded with an exclusive offer that can be applied to future reservations for the remainder of the year. 15% off rooms, 15% off food and beverage at Taps Bar and Cafe. Learn more at theabernathy.com. If you run a business that conducts credit card transactions with customers, you got to learn about Tandem Payment. Credit card processing company has offices throughout the Southeast, but the one in Greenville in the upstate, headed up by a 2005 Clemson grad. Tandem's technology allows business owners to offset their credit card processing costs by applying a small customer service charge to each sale they make. Tandem has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and was awarded the Better Business Integrity Award in 2013. Check them out at tandempayment.com. How can you sort of describe or recount sort of the challenge of adapting? I guess maybe let's say your last 6 years in the business were, a lot of stuff was changing over that time, but social media was becoming really big, and like you said, podcasts, a lot of the a la carte sort of revolution, I guess. I want to listen to what I want to listen to right now and screw everything else. Like, what did you guys do to sort of move that approach sort of into the modern era, so to speak, and to sort of confront all these different new forms of communication?
Yeah, when they made me sports director of the network in 2010, one of the challenges that I was tasked with was trying to kind of modernize sports talk and try to get it more, add a little flavor to it, I guess. Not that, not insulting the program. That was really my role on sports talk. Phil was kind of the old standard guy, and people, I really didn't agree with Phil on hardly anything. Love Phil to death. Like he's a dear friend, and but when it comes to our opinions, sports related, we could not be further opposite. So we spent a lot of time arguing back and forth, and it wasn't anything that was staged. It was, we didn't agree, but Twitter was something that I kind of roped him into begrudgingly, but he got on board, and we built up a nice social media following. We started the website, the Sports Talk SC website, and really built that up to where it was getting really good traffic. And it got to the point, Larry, where I almost enjoyed the social media and doing the videos and writing the little columns and opinion pieces on Sports Talk SC more than I did doing the show.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that part of it, and interacting with people, and just the passion in this state. As you know, I mean, the sports fans in this state are so dialed in and passionate, and that's really cool. I mean, I think it's really cool how engaged they are, and they're I've never seen anything like it, and people that come here and see it are blown away by it as well. And so I really enjoyed that, and that's probably what I missed the most. And I can still get on my personal Twitter feed now and try to and engage with people on that level. But that certainly was a fun part, and something I was very proud of that I did with the network is get them kind of more up to speed with the periscopes and videos and Twitter. That was really something that I wanted to work on. That was my mark. A lot of good it did as I shuttered a year after I left. So
the periscope, meaning like you would have some sort of video, like post game reaction or something,
right? Yeah, we would do periscopes and video kind of recaps, and then on Sundays we would write like a little opinion piece on what we thought we saw out there. And to me, and I still think this is the case, where somebody like Phil, and there aren't any real true columnists left in the state now other than Gene Sapikoff.
Right.
And that's too bad, because really, you need some people that you don't agree with all the time, that maybe you hardly ever agree with, but are sharing strong opinions about what they see happening in sports, asking those questions. And I thought that was something that we could try to do on a very rudimentary level with Sports Talk, is to try to be a little more opinion based than maybe that show was accustomed to when it was created 30 some odd years ago by Don Williams. I mean, it was a straight news show. It came on at 6:00. This was before the internet, and people didn't know what had happened that day. They had no clue until Don Williams and Phil Kornbluth told them what had happened. When the recruiting story broke, they didn't know about it until Phil told them. Now, by the time 6:00 rolls around, they know everything that's happened that day. It's right on their phone. It's right on their Twitter feed. It's everywhere. So it's a lot more reaction rather than just telling people news they already know.
Yeah, that's the crazy sort of, I guess, I don't know, Darwinistic kind of trend. Like in the 80s, that whole model, it was kind of pioneering, like you said, nobody knows what happened until they turn on the radio and they're getting it before the next day's newspaper. And then here comes the internet and the late 90s, early 2000s. And then suddenly that approach becomes antiquated because, and you still have Phil, and I think you and I agree, and this is nothing personal against him. It's just a professional sort of, I guess, criticism. Mm-hmm. He still has the, Joe Smith from Newberry, 6'4", 250 is considering, and like that whole, when I hear that, I'm like, man, like that's, that is just such an antiquated, I guess, way of doing things. And you wonder, I think it's fair to wonder whether some of that stuff, I don't want to say sealed the demise, but contributed to it. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The bottom line is you either evolve with the times or you don't. And, the world's changing and the way people are consuming their news is changing. And, what they really want from especially somebody like Bill, who has the gravitas to really, when he says something, people listen. And, and he's earned that. The guy has worked his entire career and it works very hard. And there's no question about that. The guy works his tail off. But I think sometimes people are looking they want to hear more about what he really thinks about something. And I think he's done more of that. He's opened up more of that, but that's just what it's always worked for him. He's done well. He's, multi-year broadcaster of the year. And there's certainly an audience for that. I just think that audience is getting smaller and smaller every year.
When I'm in Columbia and I turn on 107.5, I'm like, gosh, this is over the top Gamecock homerism. And then when I'm here at home and I turn on WCCP, I'm like, gosh, this is over the top Clemson homerism. Is there a place nowadays for more of a middle of the road sort of approach?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I think fans at the end of the day, they like hearing what they want to hear, and they don't, they get fired up and riled up when they hear something they don't like. But I do think at the end of the day, if they feel like you're being honest, they might not agree with you, and it takes some time to build up that kind of credibility. But if they think you're being honest and they respect that and they want that, they want to go and say, okay, I know I can go to this station and they're going to tell me how great it was, but I want to hear somebody tell me what really happened out there, what they really think. And, that's what we try to do on Sports Talk. And, it went both ways. We certainly, I always said we were equal opportunity offenders. I know, Tiger Phil and Corn Coot, it depended on who you talk to. And certainly we took shots at, cheap shots, I guess, I did at times, but, I was thinking about this recently, and when South Carolina was on their 5-game winning streak, I just felt it's like I always wanted to be on the other side and like pull for the team, not pull, but kind of take the stance of the team that's underneath, and you want to be a little harder on the team that's doing well and dissect them a little closer. And then, it goes the other way, then it goes the other direction. But I always I never had an opinion just because I thought it would get people to call or email or, interact. All my opinions, I tried to base them in fact and back them up. But, I can safely say that I felt like I did that well during my career. Is definitely try to balance it out on both sides, and it was a great beat to do it on because I just really I feel like I worked on the heyday of sports. Really, when people look back on it 25 years from now, they might look at that this past 10, 15 years as the mecca of sports in this state, with the championships and the high level that we've seen, and the personalities from Dabo Swinney to Steve Spurrier and Frank Martin and Ray Tanner. It's just, you don't get that in a lot of places.
A lot of Clemson fans are convinced Kornblut is a Gamecock fan. A lot of Gamecock fans convinced that he's a Clemson fan. What's the truth?
Yeah, I don't think there is. It is funny when you start doing it, and this, because when you start covering the teams and you're around them, you don't look at it. Right. You don't look at them, as a fan. When you're at a game, you're pulling for a good game. You're pulling to see something you've never seen before. So he's not a fan he really isn't a fan of either one. And I think it's just like anything else. You have certain relationships within organizations, teams that you have to manage those, of course, to make sure that it's not impacting the way you feel. But that, we're all human at the end of the day. I mean, and everybody has a bias, and I laugh at Gamecock fans that would sit there and say, "You're so biased, like your handle's Cocky Spur 21." So I don't know if you're really in the best position to be calling somebody biased. Okay,
and you have an egg for your profile picture.
Right? Yeah. It's always eggs, less than 100 followers, and a Bible verse in the profile. So that's a 100%er there.
So my opinion on the whole, who is Kornblut really a fan of thing, and I could be wrong, but this has sort of been my semi-educated guess on it, is that his commentary maybe has been influenced by less a team he has an allegiance to and more those relationships that you talked about or lack thereof, you know? So like if he no longer has, let's say, sources on the Clemson beat or whatever, or if he and Dabo had a dust up, then maybe he's more inclined to go after Dabo, you know, a few weeks later if there's some sort of issue, you know, that came about that everybody's talking about, and also vice versa, you know, not necessarily just on the Clemson side, but on the South Carolina side too. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to that. I remember when Darren Horn was at South Carolina, and I realized this. First of all, Darren Horn was just an awful basketball coach, and he wasn't a much better person to be around. But I realized towards the end, I was like, my dislike of this guy is really impacting, you know, the way I'm covering him. And it was really one of those moments where I had to ask myself, am I letting this impact me too much? You know, I really liked Jack Leggett. I thought he was a good dude. I think misunderstood, certainly intense, but as a baseball coach, I had a ton of respect, and I, you know, defended him a lot all the way to the end. And I said, am I going too far because of how I feel about Jack Leggett, or do I really feel this way? And you have to ask yourself those questions. I think if you're not at least asking yourself those questions, and you're not, you know, being honest with yourself, then you're maybe not doing your job. But, you know, if you can back things up with facts, you know, I defended Chad Holbrook to the end. Now, I didn't have an especially close relationship with him. And I think part of it, too, with me is I really, like I said before, like, you know, I like the underdog a little bit. I like kind of pulling for the underdog, so to speak, and not in a fan sense, but I do think that that's just my personality, and that's what I still do to a certain degree. So, you know, I think that there is some of that, you know, but in terms of just, you know, Will Muschamp takes shots at Phil every chance he gets. And the thing that works against Phil is he calls recruits. He talks to recruits. And anybody that is talking to a recruit is going to make a head football coach at a major program nervous. If they don't know what he's saying to these recruits, you know, that makes him kind of a dangerous person in Dabo Swinney's mind and Will Muschamp's mind, because they know he's calling their recruits, and they don't necessarily know what he's saying. I know what he's saying because I've sat right next to him while he's calling them over and over. He's just trying to get the same information everybody else is. And, you know, Phil, it just, like a lot of people, you write down a quote from an 18-year-old, and then Will Muschamp will talk to him or somebody on the staff, and he'll say, I didn't say that. And they'll think Phil made it up. So that's the problem. That's why I would rather dig ditches than do recruiting. But it's big. I get it. But I would rather, I could name 10 million things I'd rather do than recruiting.
Were you in the room when Steve Spurrier went after Ron Morris that day back in, I guess, 2010?
I was not. I was actually up at Clemson.
2011, I think it was.
Yeah, I was covering a Dabo press conference that day.
So you were in the room with us when we were all at our computers going, right. Oh my gosh.
Couldn't believe it. And, you know, when you look at kind of where we are now, it was almost a precursor. I mean, now, and even then, what bothered me about that is, you know, you don't have to agree with anything that Ron Morris has ever written or said, but that's just that was so over the top and wrong, and that was allowed at USC. And then Ron Morris is removed by the state newspaper, and Steve Spurrier handpicks a guy to replace him. And it was just an embarrassing moment for the university, for the state newspaper, and it was wrong on a lot of levels. And that's not to say that, that Ron Morris couldn't have done things better or differently, that's beside the point. It was just very poorly handled across the board, and that Ron did not deserve that, and it was disappointing that more people didn't stick up for him and stick up for just journalism in general. You should be able to ask a tough question, and a coach should be able to fire back a tough response if he wants. And but nowadays, if a reporter has the audacity to even challenge a person of power, which is their job, people get up in arms about it, and that's not the way journalism works. You're supposed to be skeptical. You're not supposed to believe everything they say. Even if you're supposed to verify those things, and when people are trying to do that, it's not well received these days.
What would you say the percentage of Gamecock fans who were taking Ron's side in that episode?
0.00001 maybe. There's people that still, if you mention his name, speak ill of him. And again, these are people that they never met Ron. And that's what I used to tell my wife when I did it. And she would see, message board thread or something on social media, and I'd be like, they don't even know me. I'm just a voice on the radio or a name on a story. It's like, you can't take that personal. I remember when I first started, and I was just getting crushed by people. I was the new guy, and frankly, like anybody that was new, I wasn't very good. But there was some thread on maybe Gamecock Central or something that I stumbled across, and that was really, really tough. I think one of the lines, I still remember this one, a guy said, K-Mac has a voice that makes my dog crawl under the bed and howl. And I still laugh at that one. And so I walk into Kornblut's office, and I'm just like, he's like, what's wrong? And I was like, well, they're just ripping me all over on these message boards. And he smiled real big. That's great. What do you mean that's great? He's like, that means that they're listening to you, that they're hearing your voice. You'd much rather than be doing that than not talking about you at all. And that really stuck with me, where I said, okay, it's nothing personal. These people at least they're listening. They know what my voice sounds like. So from that point on, I never really was fazed by much of what people said, nasty or not.
And really, I mean, it's kind of a summary of our culture we're in right now, just overall, beyond sports, where people are so bold and confrontational when they're behind a keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like you walk into a restaurant and see everybody screaming at each other. Everybody's cordial when they're in person, and the same is true. I'm sure a lot of these people who are bashing you or me or whoever behind a message board or Twitter handle, when you encounter them in person, it's a lot different. How you doing?
Right.
Good to see you. It's not, I guess that just gives you, it's almost like intoxicating, having that, not being face to face. It's almost like alcohol, probably, or maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe alcohol is involved in some of the cases.
Maybe some of them. And I know a lot of people just ignore them or block them. And one thing when I was at Sports Talk, I never blocked anybody. I'm just like, if they want to have these crazy opinions, and I would maybe punch down some against a lot of people's advice, but I was just like, no, I'm just gonna, I'll fire right back at these people, and that was just kind of what I did. I wasn't afraid of that confrontation. I looked at it more as, okay, I tried to see the good in everybody. And it is amazing how often, once you really start unpacking it, or you laugh at something that somebody says, they'll come back and say, oh, I really do actually enjoy listening to you, and I hope you're doing well, yada, yada, yada. I mean, usually that is the case with most of those people. So I always tried to see the good in them and say, this is just a passionate fan that wants to have a little discussion, a lively discussion. And most of them are. I at least that's what I tell myself, so I can sleep at night.
All right, let's say you're in a Twitter war with someone at 4:00 in the afternoon, and then you sit down at 6:00. I guess this isn't possible because the Sports Talk was from 6 to 8, but just hypothetically, at 6:00 you sit down to eat dinner with your family. Are you able to leave that that back and forth on the computer or on your phone and focus 100% on your family, or are you still just sitting there sort of stewing over it?
Yeah, and I think it was the latter more often than it should have been, because you're thinking about what you want to say, or you're getting those notifications. And Twitter, it is like a drug. And I still, and that's still where I get my news and where I follow people. But I think that was something that was definitely brought to my attention from my wife. I always felt like I needed to be engaged. If we went on vacations, we had to leave the country or go somewhere that they weren't going to have Wi-Fi, so I could completely shut down and not feel like I was going to miss something, or not know what was going on. So I think that wasn't necessarily healthy for me, or if something would happen, I would think I needed to get up and post it on the website right away, when the reality is it probably could have waited. It was 100 other places at that point, but that's just the way I'm wired. If I'm doing something, I want us to do it right. I want us to do it the right way. That's something that, that's the way I was taught, and that's just what I believe in. So I think that was, a factor from my family, feedback from them, like, get off your phone, get your nose out of your phone. And I was frankly doing it even during games where stuff's happening. And I'm sitting there tweeting back and forth at a game, about a play that happened, 10 minutes ago, and I'm missing a play right in front of me. So that's not just me. I think that has to deal with that. It's just the nature of the business now.
Well, one way to look at it, like if you spend, a half hour engaging with somebody, going back and forth, you have given that person 30 minutes of your time. You don't even know them.
Yeah.
I am totally with you on, don't block anyone. You're in the position where, you should hold yourself up to scrutiny. You're scrutinizing others, I guess is what I'm saying. So you shouldn't be sensitive about, I've maybe blocked a few people, but just people who are being totally.
I have now. I block and I bang that mute button all the time too.
Yeah.
There's no question. I kind of realize, like, life's too short. Like, why am I letting these toxic people, dive into my mentions and trigger, any kind of emotion? They don't deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, you are giving them your time, and your time is valuable, particularly the priceless time with your family. So you were saying that played a pretty big role in your decision to change careers, just not being able to turn off.
Yeah, I think so. And I started thinking about it even on like Thanksgiving. I had to worry about making sure our show went out that evening. We'd record a show. There were just a lot of different factors that were always on my plate, and that was that Thanksgiving week's a Carolina Clemson week, and and even after football season, and football and basketball overlap, and then you're driving up to Clemson to cover a basketball game, and then baseball and regionals that go into June, and maybe the College World Series into the end of June, and then you're trying to squeeze in a quick vacation with your family before, the ACC and SEC media days. It was just like a calendar never really stopped. And then, Corn would go on vacation, and then it's just one person trying to get through the dog days of summer. And he had to deal with the same thing when I left. It was just, you do that for so long, and and I had opportunities. There's things that I could have done, and other places that I could have went. I love this state. I have family here. I mean, this is kind of where my roots are. Not that I would never leave, but I didn't. It wasn't about finding a new job in radio or trying to do my own show or anything like that. I wanted to find a job in the in the 9-to-5 world, and I looked at some opportunities. I wanted to find I wasn't going to just jump at the first opportunity, but I wanted to find the right opportunity, and it definitely presented itself. And you're always nervous. Am I going to regret it? Is this a mistake? But I haven't looked back at all, even less so than I actually expected. I thought there would be times that I would just be itching to get on the air to talk about something, or but it's just not the case. It's been nice just being a a dad and just a regular family guy, and watching games on TV, knowing that I don't have to do a press conference afterwards or drive home at 3 a.m. It's been a good transition.
Who was the biggest jerk you ever covered?
Well, I think the aforementioned Darren Horn would be number one on the person that I didn't like the most. I think he was the biggest jerk for no good reason either. It's like he ran a program into the ground. So I would say Darren Horn has the biggest jerk title in my book.
I asked Mark Topher this last week. We're in a really small state. Everybody lives, you got Clemson and South Carolina fans in the same neighborhoods, same jobs, same churches, bars, all that. And yet, if each side, the other side is a bunch of, a bunch of degenerate, inbred rednecks. Is there a difference between the two fan bases from your perspective?
At the end of the day, there are subtle, personality differences. I think, and it's just because of the history of the programs. But at the end of the day, they are very similar, and 99% of all fans are pretty much the same. And you have yahoos everywhere. Now, some places definitely have more than others, but I think by and large, South Carolina and Clemson fans are very cordial with each other, and they're just passionate. But I do get a kick out of people that say, I would never live in Columbia. I wouldn't even work there. So why not? There's more than just South Carolina, the University of South Carolina and Columbia. There's more in the upstate than just Clemson. Are people that are like blood red Republicans saying, I don't know if I could ever vote for Nikki Haley. Why not? Because she didn't expand Medicaid? No, because she's a Clemson alum. I'm like, oh, okay, that's important.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, but I don't think there's a huge difference between them. I really don't. I think they have different, I guess, mindsets. I do always laugh. Gamecock fans are just always so optimistic. I think that the biggest gripe I've always had about Gamecock fans is that they just don't appreciate a good thing when they have it. They really don't. And I still remember on the air people thinking Connor Shaw shouldn't be starting, and they were mad at him and thought Dylan Thompson should be the guy. And that's their best quarterback ever. They still rip on Frank Martin, who's the best basketball coach they've had there probably in 50 years, because I guess he yells too much. So that's always annoying. They have a somewhat of that false sense of entitlement that you don't get. So that always annoyed me. And then with some Clemson people, I think the thing that annoyed me the most is acting like Clemson's this, just basically there's heaven and then there's Clemson, and nothing bad happens. It's a special place. All the people there are wonderful and great. And everybody else is terrible. That's sometimes the mantra.
So Will Muschamp, he's in a very tough spot. Perception wise. Number one, you got the double-edged Spurrier shadow in that Spurrier set a new standard for very high achievement, 11 wins 3 years in a row, beating Clemson 5 years in a row. But on the other hand, he fell asleep at the wheel in recruiting and left the program in shambles. And then you have the monster in the upstate, your rival within the state, and then the monster in Athens in your division. The program looks like it's in pretty good shape. And at any other period in South Carolina football history, people would be pretty happy with them. Mm-hmm. But all those factors, like what's the end game? How does this end up for him over the next couple of years?
And I think he's in big trouble, potentially for the reasons you just said, because of that perception. He's going to be compared against his rival, and nobody's beating Clemson now.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
It's not like, South Carolina's getting beat. They're beating everybody they're playing. And it almost gets back. I mentioned Jack Leggett. It wasn't like the Clemson baseball program is, and I like Monty Lee a lot. He's a great coach. He's going to do a fine job, doing a fine job. But it's not like the program is way better now than it was when Leggett was there. His biggest problem was he was getting beat by a South Carolina team that was beating everybody too.
Yeah.
And he was judged by that. And that's what's going to happen with Will Muschamp. And not only is Clemson winning national championships now, not just the ACC or winning 10 games and beating them. We've seen Tommy Bowden used to beat them all the time, but Clemson was still kind of just run of the mill. They had their moments, but they weren't anything obviously like they are now. And then Georgia, you mentioned, they're crushing it. Muschamp is putting together some of the best recruiting classes since really Spurrier. The class he's putting together this year might be the best one since Spurrier landed Clowney and Lattimore and all of those guys. But the bottom line is that they're going to win 6 or 7 games next year and have a pretty good football team. But they're going to win 6 or 7 games, and fans, being what they are going to say, he needs to go.
Yeah.
They've got to get somebody fresh and young. And, that's where it's going to put Ray Tanner in that position where he's going to have to make a call. But I think if they leave Will Muschamp alone, he's never going to wow anybody with exciting quotes. He's that quintessential football coach. I think he still has to prove some things, but there's no question that he's at least building back up the talent that was just barren when he took over. And he's got recruits that are starting to listen to him now. But he is still light years behind Clemson and Georgia. And that's a gap that he's probably not going to be able to make up anytime soon. That doesn't mean he can't have a lot of success. It doesn't mean they can't have a few big seasons, but I don't know that fans are going to be as patient with them. If they lose by 21 against Clemson again this year and lose to Georgia. And if they happen to lose to Kentucky or anybody that they're not supposed to, he's really going to feel it. And, when Columbia goes negative, I mean, it sucks all the energy out of the entire city. And I've seen it happen with a lot of athletic teams in this town.
The newest supporter of the Clemson Dubcast and winner of the Clemson Area Chamber of Commerce Business of the Year Award, Founders Federal Credit Union. If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers, and all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership, as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Membership at Founders has many benefits: great rates on loans and savings products, advice on investments and insurance products, and even a Clemson debit card available for any Founders member with a checking account. Founders Federal Credit Union is federally insured by the NCUA. If you're in Clemson, stop by and see Matt and his staff, 680 Old Greenville Highway, Suite 300, right next to the Walmart Neighborhood Market. Big supporter of the Clemson Dubcast is Harris Flooring America. Based in Anderson, South Carolina, Harris Flooring has been instrumental in a lot of the facilities transformation you've seen on Clemson's campus lately. From the Allen Reeves Center to the McFadden Building to Memorial Stadium to the Neary Center. Family owned and operated since 1947. The owner, Scott Junkins, big Clemson guy. Harris Flooring is just as good inside the home and the residential realm as they are with the larger scale commercial stuff. Give them a call, 864-642-6183, or online at flooringamerica-anderson.com. Throughout their football history, South Carolina fans' psyche has experienced some really low periods.
Yeah.
Notably the 0-11 and among other times. My question, though, given all those factors that we just talked about, is their psyche right now does it rank around the lowest that it's ever been? Is that too extreme? Just given.
Yeah, I don't think it's that low. I mean, I think Clemson winning those national championships definitely was a blow, but I mean, their programs are across the board. Back when Lou Holtz took over, their football team was garbage. Their facilities were garbage. They had a long way to go. And, Spurrier did, even though he left it in a bad spot, did give them a little bit of street cred that at least, you know what? they can get there. In fact, you can make a strong case that Spurrier underachieved with some of those teams. They had inexplicable losses that kept them out of an SEC championship game and maybe out of a chance to play for a championship of their own. Losing to Tennessee and losing to Auburn at home. You look at the talent that they had on those teams, but it can be done. Now, granted, maybe they have to just hope that there's a big influx of in-state talent again. Maybe he caught lightning in a bottle, but either way, even if Clemson does win for a sixth straight year, the football program is in better shape now than it was 15 years ago. The program, the facilities across the board are in better shape. The basketball program is in better shape than it's been, more stable ground than it's been in 3-4 decades. They're making strides to at least look the part, but they always are going to face the challenges that have been around them for decades and decades, and that's just the reality of it. But I don't think Gamecock fans, I don't sense that they are that downtrodden now, because they're getting enough success in other areas where they feel like they're competing at least, and and they still have a shot. They still feel like they have a puncher shot next season to maybe do something. Maybe they don't, but the basketball team and the baseball team, I think across the board, South Carolina Athletics are in much better shape.
As of, I guess, 2012, the SEC had won 7 straight BCS titles. Their television revenues were just rendering the ACC's microscopic. And there was a feeling that there was no way Clemson was going to ever be able to compete with the Blue Bloods, and not just the Blue Bloods, but also South Carolina in that battle. South Carolina was bringing home however many more millions of dollars a year, and there was just this feeling that they were gonna push even further ahead of Clemson. How remarkable! Well, first of all, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And second, how remarkable is it that Clemson is doing what it's doing? It's become a blue blood in a few years, when just a few years ago, if you suggested that Clemson would become that, people would have laughed at you.
Yeah, they would have. They absolutely would have. And, it's a lot of things where I think Clemson made all the right decisions in terms of investing in their facilities and their program. They got the right coach. I mean, Terry Don Phillips, putting Dabo Swinney and making that move, and then sticking by him when, after the Meineke Car Care Bowl, where, there were times when fans were very upset after 5 straight losses to South Carolina. There were fans that were saying this isn't the guy, but they stayed the course and really let Dabo do what he needed to do and build it his way, and not panic. And I think we see this across the board with programs, high level programs like LSU or Notre Dame, or these teams that fire through coaches every 4 or 5 years. It's just not a way that you win. You have to ride it out sometimes through the ebbs and flows of building a program up on that level. And at some point, Clemson's going to have an 8 or 9 win season. I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to be anytime soon, but at some point they might have back-to-back 8 or 9 win seasons. But that's just the reality of it. But they stuck with Dabo, and it's been remarkable. And I know Brad Brownell almost got fired the next year. They go to the NCAA tournament, and he's probably back on the hot seat again this year. But I just think there's something to be said for sticking by a coach. Now, if he's doing stuff that's just ridiculous and breaking rules and just awful, that's fine to make the change. But I just look at the organizations across sports that are the most successful. It's the ones that have stability and longevity and within their athletic programs and their coaching, and that to me is the key. And that's kind of gets back to how Clemson did that, and I think that's exactly how they did it. Ray Tanner, when he was a baseball coach at South Carolina, it took some time. People forget he went to 3. It took him a while to go to the College World Series. They went 3 straight years, and then they had about you know, 6 or 7, 8 years where they didn't go back, and then they went back 3 more times and won it twice. It's gonna work that way. But you just have to kind of ride it out, and fans are less and less inclined to do that now, and a lot of athletic directors are less inclined to ride it out with their coaches.
Do you remember when it first dawned on you that Dabo had, the makings of something special?
I think when I saw Deshaun Watson play at Florida State his freshman year, that's when I said, they didn't end up winning that game, but a true freshman, what he did, the poise that he had in that game, it was incredible. And you knew he was special, and Dabo had something special there. And, then you look back, even when, they weren't beating South Carolina, they were winning 10 games. Those were good teams. And he was just slowly building things up. And I know Gamecock fans thought, it was all a mental block. I was like, eventually, it's coming down to players. South Carolina's had some better players, but Clemson's recruiting, and you saw what they were doing, and Gamecock fans just brushed it off. But that's when I realized that he really is on the next level now. They're about to take that next step with a quarterback like that. That I thought was a once in a generation quarterback, but then they got another once in a generation quarterback right behind him. But that was the moment, Tallahassee, Florida, when he came in that game, and watching how he played.
I've asked a number of my guests this. Over the next 5 years, what's the over-under on national championships that Clemson wins?
Yeah, that they win. I mean, I would put it, if I wanted to be really sneaky like Vegas, I would say 1.5 and see how many people would go on either side of it, because, I definitely see 1 to 2. And it's so hard to do it. And I think this is the danger for Dabo now, because they've been there so many times. They've won it a couple of times now, that people are going to forget how hard it is to do that. And Dabo's kind of touched on it. He fired off on some people after the South Carolina game. You do run into that complacency and that kind of expectation from fans that, we go to the playoffs every year, and we play for championships here at Clemson. And if anything less than that isn't good enough. And that's a big, big cross to bear. And that's a lot of pressure. And especially if fans aren't really fired up and jazzed up for the wins, that's when coaches start saying, maybe I should look at another challenge somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Not saying that's what Dabo would do, but I think those are the things that'll be if I'm him, those are the things that are in my mind. Are fans still going to stay behind me, or is this still exciting for me and for them, considering that we're doing it so much? Because he knows how hard it is. Guys like Dabo Swinney and Urban Meyer and Nick Saban, they know how hard it is to win any game in college football. I do believe that. That's one thing that I think too, Larry. It's like we're around these teams, or you're around them all week, and you see how much preparation and practice and effort goes into every single game, and you see how hard the players work, and it is not easy for those guys to go out and win on that level, as competitive as it is. And people forget that the other schools have scholarship players too. They have high paid coaches. They're practicing. So it's hard. Sometimes you just get beat. It doesn't mean that the coach should get fired. Sometimes you get beat by a team.
Is there one thing you missed the most from your previous career?
Yeah, I miss, I miss the people, and I miss the press box. I miss, going into, Death Valley for a 7:00 game and getting there at 4, and when the stadium's empty, and watching it fill up, and watching just the electricity build to kickoff, and hearing the crowd, and being a part of that is amazing. So I do miss that. There are a lot of times that that I miss that part, or after a game, hanging out with everybody, and kind of, because you're it's a fraternity almost, because everybody's doing it together. So those trips, and you were on a lot of them, to New York for the NIT or bowl games in Nashville. or Orlando and Tampa. So a lot of great memories and a lot of fun that's had there. Covering those games and talking about them and trying to figure out what's happening in the beat.
Do you think the baseballs we signed at that bar in New York City are still on display?
I think they are. In fact, I know they are because I was there last December and I checked.
What's the bar called? Foley's. Okay. I'm actually going to New York City this weekend for a long weekend. So I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah, you'll have to find it. It takes some time to have a lot in there. But Foley's in New York City around 33rd Street. It's a great baseball bar. I follow them on social media, and they get a lot of the big baseball writers that come through there. So it's a really cool bar. But somehow they thought because we were reporters from South Carolina that we should, you see like Jim Gray and then Kevin McCrarey. Oops. But they treated us like royalty while we were there for sure.
Who would have thought we would have higher profile in New York City than in our home states where we work?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was a great trip. Yeah, that was a very great trip.
Kevin, you are getting ready for a vacation, so I'll let you get back to packing and all that stuff for your trip to Florida, but really appreciate the conversation. This has been great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, Larry. I appreciate it. It was great catching up.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, thanks to KMAC, Kevin McCrarey, for joining us for such an extended period. Thoughtful conversation there. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate our list of sponsors. Title sponsor, Parham Smith and Argentole Law Firm in Greenville. The Abernathy Boutique Hotel right smack dab in Clemson, right next to the stadium. Founders Federal Credit Union, also in Clemson. Uptown Realty down in the PD area. Also the Eastern Midlands. Harris Flooring America in Anderson. And last but definitely not least, Tandem Payment in Greenville. Most of all, thanks to you all for making this part of your listening routine. I believe we've had close to 6,000 downloads in the last 2 weeks. Really appreciate it. Everybody have a great rest of the week and weekend, and we'll be back next week. Cheers.